All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our November garden talk. This is Jane Grellinger, who's been a longtime Master Gardener volunteer, and she today is going to give us some tips and tricks and how she gets her orchids to bloom after we go out and buy them and then don't know what to do. So Jane, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Good morning. It's nice to see so many people have logged on. Today we're going to talk about orchids, and I thought maybe I'd just say I received my first orchid as a Valentine gift a few years ago, and since then my husband has blessed me with many orchids, so I have quite a few, but they're all similar. We're going to talk about growing. They're growing in popularity, and many people are using the orchids in or as part of their interior decorating. Phalaenopsis is one that is most commonly found in our garden stores and in our pictures because it adapts well to our home or to interior growth, and the blooms last quite a long time. Most orchid flowers last 3 months, or give or take the growing conditions. What is an orchid? An orchid means testicle, and that's because the lower part of the root grows directly under the leaves, and it's buried in the soil, but it has a similar shape to a testicle. Orchids, the family is Orchidae, and it is one of the largest plant families with 2,500 species in the wild and 750 genera. Some common orchids used by florists are cattleyas. Those are the ones we used to see as Easter corsages. Cymbidium, those are used quite often in bridal bouquets. And then the Phalaenopsis, quite often you see these even cut in flower arrangements. Orchids are easy to hybrid, and many crossbreed, and many people are developing new hybrids all the time. Jan's going to show us some pictures on the PowerPoint.
We're gonna share. All right, there you go, Jane.
This is a picture of the bloom of the Phalaenopsis, and like I said, this is one of the most common orchids that you see for retail purchase. Want to do the next?
Yep, I'm trying to figure out. It doesn't want to go to the next. All right.
The structure of
there we go. Sorry.
Now that's a picture of the bud before it opens, and when I purchase an orchid, I like to look for plants that still have buds on them and nice healthy new growth tissue, which is just below the bud, showing them that it's going to form another bud below it. That way you'll prolong your enjoyment.
Whoops.
Whoop.
I don't know, it's got a mind of its own today.
Now this is a close-up of the new flower bud as it is forming in the axis of the plant. Now here, they can't see
you.
Yeah. Okay, this is what you would look for when you're looking at your plant, when you're trying to get it to rebloom. The leaf grows first, and it needs to be fully developed, and then when you see that the leaf is fully developed, you look for the new bud shoot and you look for the new root.
Here, Jane, let me get out of sharing and you can show them closer on that plan if you want to.
Okay, this is a new blossom shoot that's coming out from the axis of the plant and growing straight up. And then this is the new root shoot that you will see.
All right, so I can go back into share screen and we'll show them the root close up. Okay, so we have the flower spike. Oh, and then we were going to talk about, yep, it's very touchy today.
Yeah, the new blossom spike shows at the tip where each of the new flowers is going to come. It's right there that Jan's showing you right now.
And
Now that is an old shoot.
Yeah.
And that shows how you would trim your old shoot after the main flower has happened. You go back to the next live node on your stem.
Sorry, I don't know why it's doing that.
That's okay. And then you can see that a new flower shoot is coming out from that old flower shoot. And it will grow up and produce more flowers.
All right, and then we've got the roots here. So.
Right, the new root is showing to a bright green coming out from the main stem of the plant. And then the long shoot over to the right root shows the more mature root.
All right.
And it also shows the white coating that appears. And that is vellum. And that helps with air. And it also absorbs water and nutrients.
And then you wanted to point out this dead spike down here, I think?
That is where an old flower has been trimmed off, from a previous blooming. I just thought they're very woody and it's very hard to clip them. So make sure you use strong scissors. I've had better luck not trying to cut them too short because you might damage the leaf.
All right, Jane, and I think we've got just your book.
I have used this book, Orchid Growing Basics by Dr. Gustav Schozer. It's a very good reference, and I received much information from that.
All right, let me stop sharing, and then you are back live.
Okay. Monopodial means leaves appearing on here. Most orchids belong to that type of growth. Now the leaf has parallel veins. You'll see there's a very distinctive vein down the middle of the leaf, and then the veins appear off to the side from there, and they grow the length of the leaf rather than out to the side. They're all growing in the long ways of the leaf. The roots absorb many nutrients and water, and help them cling to their host, which would be tree bark. Orchids grow naturally in the tropics and the rainforests in the undergrowth. Now the epiphytes, which would be the ones that grow up on the tree and on rocks, have adapted from growing in the undergrowth because they weren't getting enough light. So they just naturally grew up onto the host tree. Pot culture requires us to provide similar growing conditions to what they would have in nature. Temperature, light, and moisture and nutrients. This Phalaenopsis orchid requires temperatures between 64 and 77 degrees, which allows it to grow quite comfortably in our homes. And it requires about 12 hours of indirect light. Now, in our homes, sometimes we can't provide 100% humidity. So we have to adapt our conditions that we provide for that orchid to be more accommodating to that orchid. So in our homes, if you have it near a window, you're going to find that your heat run is right there also. So the heat run is going to dry out your plant quicker in the winter than it would in the summer when you're running your heating system. And then Jan pointed out to me too that most people have air conditioning now, and this also dries out your atmosphere in your house. So there's some things that we can do that will help us to have a better growing condition. Light is part of all living plants need light because the light provides photosynthesis, which helps our plants to grow and develop. Now in the tropics, where these grow naturally, they have sunlight 12 hours a day, 365 days of the year. But in our homes, we don't have that luxury. So in the summer, if you have your plant in a south exposure window, you would want to filter that because they don't like direct sunlight. So you would need to have a blind or a curtain or a shade that you could draw, or to not have that direct light, or else place the plant further away from the window. During the summer, western exposure would probably be more ideal. And during the winter, you would be able to have it in that south exposure window. If they do not have enough light, it tends to stop the growth of the plant. They'll just sit there and not do anything. If you have a lot of orchids and you don't have enough window space, you can use fluorescent lighting to supplement. For plant growth, you need to have one cool white bulb and one soft white bulb, or a grow lux bulb. And the bulb needs to be 12 to 14 inches above the plant so that it gets enough light. But don't have the bulb too close because of the heat, and also don't have it longer than 14 hours a day. So now the humidity. None of us has 100% humidity in our homes.
And nor do we want to.
Unless you're in the shower. And orchids like 100% humidity, like they would get in the tropics. So we can supplement that by using a can filled with gravel that you would set your pot on. And then as the moisture is evaporated from our heating or cooling systems, the plant can absorb it. This is an orchid pot. And as you see, it has holes all over it. And that allows the roots and the air to filter in directly to the roots of the orchid plant. Most of the plants that we purchase come in this type of a pot. It has generous holes in the bottom for drainage, and it has a crown in the center that allows us to put the root of the orchid plant directly on that, so it's not sitting down in the water. And this you could also sit right directly on top of the gravel, and it can absorb the moisture around it. The easiest way to provide that 100% humidity for the plant is to use a mist. And you just fill your bottle with plain water and you can mist them. You don't need to do it all the time, but a couple of times a week helps to maintain that humidity. When you are watering your plant, you want to use room temperature water. Now, I have the convenience of having rainwater available. So I use soft rainwater for watering all my plants. Many people don't. If you have a chlorinated water or a water softener, you have to draw your water off at least 24 hours ahead of time and let it set so that the chlorine dissipates, or that anything that the salts in the water will settle out, so you don't use those when you're watering the plant.
And no distilled water, right?
Distilled water tends to not have as many nutrients in it, so it's not a good idea to use that. The rainwater is really the best, or soft water, but not from a water softener. That's not what I mean by soft water. We can provide artificial nutrition for the plant. You can use a slow-acting fertilizer that you would add directly to your potting medium, or you can add a water-soluble fertilizer supplement to your water. Now this needs to be in very slight amounts, about 1/4 of a teaspoon of fertilizer to a gallon of water. So it's a very dilute solution. Now, when you water your plant, you want to always make sure that the medium becomes hydrated, but you don't want to ever let it stand in water. So it's best to water once a week during the winter, when the plant is usually not as actively growing, and twice a week in the summer. Now, the growth and flowering of a plant takes place in a rhythmic pattern, and there's internal conditions within the orchid plant, and there's external conditions. Orchids, like I said before, grow in a very routine manner. The leaf forms first, and then you'll see a new leaf start right down in the center, and it'll appear like a little fold, and then it'll grow accordingly. And this is the new leaf on this plant. Then once you see this new leaf fully matured, then you would start to look for those other flower buds and root buds to start appearing. And we can seldom reproduce the exact pattern that happens in nature, but we can do our best to try and duplicate that. Now we're going to discuss how we would go about repotting or transplanting. It's recommended that we can use almost any material that has a very porous consistency. We want to keep the air and the moisture available, so you don't ever want your soil to become compacted. You know, like sometimes in your house plants, from watering and drying out and what have you, it becomes very compacted. Orchids don't like that at all. They want a nice loose soil so that they can absorb the air and the nutrients through these roots. So that's why the air holes in your pot, that allows for good circulation of air. It's recommended that you always hydrate your potting medium ahead of time, because it's so dry in the bag that it's very hard to rehydrate it once you have it on in your pot or on the. You know, this is just a mixture of bark, perlite, and a little charcoal. The charcoal keeps it fresh. But it's very, very, very dry, so it's hard to get it rehydrated once you started to put it in your pot. You always want to make sure that you have plenty of drainage also. Don't, if you use a regular pot, a regular clay pot, you want to put some gravel or broken shards in the bottom of your pot, because you want to keep that, what they call the testicle, the bottom part of the root, is just a fleshy kind of oval, and it's at the bottom of the leaves under here. But you don't ever want that to be down so that it would be standing in any water, because that will rot your plant very quickly. You can use almost any material, like on the, you know, this orchid mix is basically tree bark, but you can use mosses. This would be a sphagnum moss, and this also would have to be rehydrated prior to transplanting. You never want to transplant a plant when it's in flower, because that interrupts the cycle and many of your flowers will drop off. This one had a little accident on his traveling here today, so he broke off. If you have this stem still attached, which this one doesn't, you can put it in a vase or a vial of water and it will last. Like when they make the leis over in Hawaii or in the tropics, they pick them right off and they try to keep a little stem on them, and then they just thread them together. The Phalaenopsis usually grows in a pattern, so you get the growth happening in the summer and fall. And then you will have your flowers more toward winter. And like I said, you don't want to transplant when it's in flower. So you would wait until these blooms have fallen, and then you would again trim back your stem of the flower. Now, some people say you should cut it back to the plant, like I have done here. But that's I did that after the shoot was completely dried down. When it's alive and growing, say these all dropped off, you look back on your stem to that new growth point, which would be one of these leaf nodes or bud nodes. And then you would cut slightly above that and then wait and see. You know, I mean, if it does dry up, you could cut it off, but you might get another flower shoot coming out here, like occurred right here. This is another flower shoot appearing back after the main blossoming. You also want to look at the tip up here, because that will show a swelling, and that means that that's going to continue to grow and maybe produce more flowers there. So don't cut your shoot off too quickly after blooming. Now, I wanted to tell you, this plant is about 3.5 years old. It's from Valentine's Day. It will be 4 years ago. And a sign of a healthy plant is a plant that keeps developing new leaves. And this one has, as you can see, the little leaf here from when it first grew. And then each leaf each year is getting larger and fuller. A lot of these leaves can grow to as much as 24 inches long and 10 inches wide out in natural habitat. This is just a new plant here, and so you can see that this is probably at least 2 years old before it was even ready for sale. Now back to potting. When you are potting or wondering if you should pot, you look at the existing soil and see if it's absorbing moisture when you water it. Is it look compacted, or is it not have enough air space in it so that the plant can grow? Now this one's growing nice and healthy, so it's not necessary to transplant this one yet. But most plants need to have new soil every 3 to 5 years, so they aren't hard to take care of. In our homes and in greenhouses, they use these stakes to stake up the flowers so that they're growing upright. Now, in nature, this plant would be clinging to a tree branch and hanging basically sideways or upside down from here. And these blossoms would be draping down. So to get them to grow for our pot culture, for our aesthetics in our homes, these stakes are necessary to keep the plant from growing, the flower from growing down. The plant itself and the root system should be healthy enough to support these shoots. Now this one I haven't clipped yet, put onto the onto the stake. You can't do it too soon because if you try to bend it too much, they aren't that flexible, and you don't want to break them off. But this one I started, put the clip on just a couple days ago because they were growing toward the light, toward the window. And if you want to keep them growing upright, then you just put these little clips on for support. Oh, let's see. Orchid plants may be put outside during the summer months when the temperatures are in the 60 to 70 degree range. You'd want to place them in filtered light, maybe west or north side of your home. You don't want to put them where they're going to be forgotten because you want to maintain that moisture and that humidity for them. And you'd have to provide that type of growing condition outside. Common pests of the orchid plant, the biggest problem with an orchid plant is the fact that they get rotten roots. And that's because if you don't double check after you want to leave the water on the plant long enough for the plant to absorb the moisture, but you don't want to leave the water standing in the container because there's no drainage here, and that would allow for your root rot. On this plant right here, you can see that it has nice, healthy growing roots in here, and that it's nice and green, and everything is growing very well. If you leave that water stand in the bottom of this container, there's a little dab in there, but it's not. It's up because of the way the pot is designed. It keeps it up off of that root so it won't rot. But you don't want to leave a lot of water in there because it will rot. So that's the biggest problem with them. Now, they are susceptible to red spider mites, aphids, mealybugs, and scale, and snails. Because of the high humidity conditions that you provide for it, snails like those conditions too. So when you're bringing your plant back in the fall, you want to make sure that you take the pot out and double check it and make sure there's no hitchhikers. And then you probably should use a general purpose houseplant spray to spray those leaves and that, and make sure that there's no critters coming in the house with you. And like I said, be sure to bring them in when the temperatures drop below that 68, 66 degrees. Jan said we should talk a little bit about how to purchase a plant. And I would say that, first of all, you want to look for one that's got good, healthy leaf growth, good, healthy color. The leaves are normally from a dark green to a light green. Some orchids have a reddish brown color, but the Phalaenopsis have the nice rich green color. The leaves are very leathery, very thick, and you wouldn't want one that has a wilted or a dull look. These are quite shiny. If you get one that has a dull wilted leaf, they are not healthy. And you want to look for plants that have buds, not necessarily open flowers. If you have a few buds, then that means that you're going to have the potential of enjoying that bloom longer. Sometimes if all the buds are open, then you know that you don't know how long it's been open, and you won't get as long to enjoy it. And like I said, don't purchase plants, in our big box stores, retail stores. Sometimes they get neglected and people don't care for them the way they should. But in that case, don't purchase that plant that's wilted, and because they don't come back easily. If your plant gets really dried out and maybe you forgot or you went away on vacation and that plant's gotten really dried out, you want to set it in a sink or in a pan of water where you can water that and get that potting medium to reabsorb moisture, to become hydrated. But then make sure that you drain any extra water off. Don't allow it to stand in that water. I guess that's about all I have to present. I guess we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, that's good, Jane. I think there's one in the chat here, so let me check it. Oh, we can't do a close-up. Sorry, Lucy. Does anybody have a question for Jane? They can unmute or put it in the chat. I think my question, Jane, is on your one plant with the roots, when you're buying a plant, maybe you could talk a little bit about those silvery roots versus the darker roots, just so people, because I always look for a plant. My mom loves orchids, so she gets orchids from me. I look for the plant that's got the silvery roots, maybe more silvery roots than the brown roots, because I think those are the healthier roots, right? Would that be right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The silvery roots are the roots that are growing, obviously above the soil.
Okay.
In a tree, this root would just wander around through the bark and attach itself to the tree.
Okay.
See, we're not providing that.
We're not providing a tree for them. Okay.
Right. And so these roots that look dark and what have you are actually growing down into your potting medium.
So they're going down into the substrate.
Right.
Okay.
And that, like I showed here, I know you can't see it too well, but these leaves these roots are nice and green.
Right.
Down in here. And the green healthy roots are going to be absorbing that moisture the same as these out here. These roots, say you were going to transplant this plant, you can cut these right off.
Oh, okay.
It said in the book that you could cut your root system back to 4 to 6 inches when you're transplanting it into a new pot. These roots, if they get broken off, say this one's gotten bent and it looks like it's broken, but it's actually still growing out here.
Okay.
Even though it's bent. If the root gets broken off, can't see one right now. This one here got broken off here on the end, but they will bud and sprout right back out.
Okay.
So like if you cut this off when you were transplanting so that you could get more roots down into the soil or into your substrate, it wouldn't hurt it.
All right.
It'll sprout out again at the end. And
so we do have a question about the ice cube and the orchid to water it.
oh, I think they developed that as a marketing technique. The ice cube is not room temperature, of course, but the ice cube, when you lay it on top of this, melts slowly, so it allows the moisture to rehydrate your potting medium. So it's dissolving slowly, and that way the bark can absorb that moisture. When you pour water on here, it runs through quickly, and it doesn't oftentimes give it time to absorb. The drawback there is that there's no fertilizer in that ice cube unless you specifically made ice cubes. And it's recommended that you use room temperature water to water with, so an ice cube is definitely not room temperature.
Yeah, I think that was a
So
good
there's-
marketing thing for people to, because I think orchids are so exotic. I think some people are like afraid to, but it's like, oh, if I just put a ice cube on it to water it, no big deal. But I think the main thing is to keep your medium hydrated.
Right,
Yeah.
but not standing in water.
Ice cube, oh, Lucy is also saying ice cubes meant to prevent overwatering. That's another good point. And then we had a question, how do you get your orchids to rebloom? Is that part of the cycle of the orchid?
It is, it's internal within the orchid, and if you provide the proper growing conditions, the humidity and the fertilizer that they need, so that they're growing, like over the summer, I didn't have hardly any blossoms. And of course, in reading the book, I find, that when you see that new leaf appear, and you think, oh, the plant's not doing anything, but it is, it's growing, it's developing that new leaf, it's in its cycle. And when that new leaf is mature, then you start looking for the new roots and the new flower buds.
So in Western New York, are there any temperature triggers on the orchids that tell them to go into their cycle, or a light trigger? Do you know?
The Phalaenopsis grows mostly in the summer months from May to September.
So then it would bloom for us in fall and winter?
Mhm.
So after its growth period?
Yeah.
And then it basically goes
Right,
dormant
because
when it's
this-
done blooming?
Right,
Okay.
and I have found that, if you're providing the fertilizer, even though it's seems like nothing, in a regular basis, you don't have to do it every time you water, but if you're watering once or twice a week and you put that fertilizer in your water while it's standing, it's such a minute amount
Right.
that it provides.
So Leslie was wondering if we could actually demonstrate how to repot, but I don't think you brought one you want to take out of the pot.
No,
So maybe we'll do a follow-up and have a short YouTube video on repotting when it's time to.
right, because you don't want to repot this plant now that it's showing all these nice new flower
Right.
spikes.
So maybe we'll keep that in mind for spring, and we'll just do a short little demo and we could post it when it's repotting time.
Right, it would be anywhere from the end of January to May when they've gone out of flower.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind and we'll do that.
Okay.
If you were to train a plant to cascade, is there a particular type of tree that is best to grow the orchid on?
Okay, when we were at, I believe it was Longwood
Longwood?
Gardens.
Yeah.
They had a huge display of orchids. And a lot of them they had growing in a vertical, almost shelf-like display, where they actually had the plant growing like it would be growing on a tree. And then it was allowed to just hang down and drape.
All right. Yes.
It shows in the book, especially the semi-podial ones that grow linearly, transplanting that onto a piece of bark. There are some pieces of wood that you can purchase that are like hollow, and then they have holes in them. I don't know what kind of
What kind of wood they
it
use?
is, but you actually plant it in that And then mount that and then let them drape down.
Yeah, so in Western New York, we're not going to do that outside on a tree because.
Well, you could for a couple months.
For a
but then
couple
you'd
months,
have to
yeah.
have a place to bring
Yeah.
it into.
Yeah. Yeah. Have we ever grown orchids outside? Any tips? So you did mention they can go out in the summer, but they need a filtered.
They need the filtered light and they need to maintain that moisture. That humidity.
So
And
it's not a bad idea to give them a vacation because it's usually more humid, but they do need to stay in the filtered, out of bright sunlight.
yeah, they said north or west.
West, because I would think east.
I don't know. In the book it
Says west, because my west side would be too hot in the summer. I mean,
Yeah.
too sunny.
Mhm.
So folks, find a good spot on your property that's filtered light, no bright direct sunlight.
I'm thinking like at the north side of my house, I have a nice Japanese maple tree. It's at the northeast corner of my house. And that maple tree, when it has its leaves on, would provide enough filtered light.
Yeah.
I haven't tried to put them outside.
And I wonder if you have like a pergola or an arbor or something, you might be able to, if that's covered or has plants growing up it, maybe.
Yeah.
It,
It'd have to be hard to provide enough humidity.
humidity. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
But you could try them in a hanging basket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of, you know.
And I know the American Orchid Society had a lot of information on their site too, so we would recommend checking out their website. They had some good fact sheets, and the book Jane got out of the library has been pretty beneficial to her.
And the Orchid Society at the Botanical Garden
that's right.
in Buffalo.
You were going to mention that.
Yes, that they have in the spring. They always have orchid show, and they also do provide potting and repotting of your orchid if you take it in.
So that's good to remember. Erie County Botanical Gardens in the spring, orchid show, and repotting.
Mhm.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, Marianne, I plant my orchids directly into pot. Right now, leaves look droopy with lines on them. Suggestions?
Have you been fertilizing?
Has she been fertilizing? Bonnie, or Marianne, do you want to unmute and we can conversation? No, she's not been fertilizing. Let me see if I can unmute.
This green of this plant is rather dark, and they said that normally they would be more of a medium green. I don't know if I'm maybe giving it a little too much fertilizer, but it's been this way and it's been very healthy. Like I said, I've had this one. It'll be 4 years Valentine's Day.
Yeah, Marianne, I think you're unmuted, so go ahead and we can have a little conversation. Are you there? No, I'm not hearing you.
Okay. Are you providing humidity for it? Are you trying to hydrate? Let's see, I'm thinking maybe the soil or the substrate that it's planted in might be not getting enough air, or it might, just be old.
Well, if
she would
she's
need to
potting, I guess, Marianne, what is your soil substrate? Did you use regular potting soil? Did you use the orchid mix? Maybe it's too compacted. So houseplants, potting soil, underwatering, and fertilizing. I'm thinking.
that's.
So those would be the things we would look into. Okay, Lucy's got beautiful orchids growing.
Yeah, Lucy.
Anybody else got questions for Jane today?
Don't be afraid of them. Buy one and give it a shot, or tell somebody you'd like to try an orchid.
What is Marianne's watering schedule, I wonder?
Oh yeah, I don't know, Lucy. That's a good point. Yeah, I think she needs to check her substrate and is she regularly watering?
Or
'Cause droopy makes me
overwatering.
think,
Yeah, well, over or underwatering is not good.
right.
That's bad.
Yeah, so Marianne, if you actually want to call in the Master Gardener helpline on a Monday, Lucy is frequently there. So 585-343-3040 extension 127. And maybe we can hook you up with Lucy or Jane and get your orchid back in shape.
I know at the library in Oakfield, they have an orchid and
Yeah.
it only gets artificial light and it's not thriving. It's existing, but it's not thriving. And I know they
All right, Marianne's having trouble
do water
unmuting.
it, but
One last question for you, Jane. Is there an average lifetime for an orchid?
boy. I think if you let the root rot, it's sure death. If you keep your humidity and your fertilizing of the orchid, I think they can go on for years. I've known some people that have the semi-podial ones that get, and in some of the displays.
Yeah, I don't know what their life would be in nature either. So
No, because like when they didn't grow well on the floor of the forests, they moved themselves up the up into the tree.
yeah.
I didn't think to ask.
Yeah, we
I
don't
talked
we
to
don't
the
know,
dads
Leslie.
along with gardens.
We don't know.
Google says they don't have a lifespan.
Oh, Google says they don't have a lifespan, so I guess we'll believe that. Good old Google.
Good old Google.
Okay, repeat the phone number. Yes. 585-343-3040 extension 127. Or you can check our website out too, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Genesee County. So let me see if I can put it in the chat. Well, Rachel, maybe you could, oh, she's probably gone. 585-343-3040. Extension 27. All right. All right. Is the video on the dahlias available to view? Yes, it is. It's up on our YouTube page. So when this one's ready to view, I will send out an email to everyone that registered with the link to our YouTube page. The link to our YouTube page, I believe, is also on our website, or you can go to YouTube and put in Cornell Cooperative Extension, Genesee County, and that'll bring you to our page. So all of our garden talks that we've done on Zoom are there. Garden tours are there, plant spotlights, some of our other programs that aren't garden talks. We have been putting them up on our YouTube page. So I think we'll end for the day. It's been just about an hour, and I want to thank everybody. It was good seeing you, sort of.
Not the same as in person.
No, it's not, but we will be doing another garden talk the first Thursday in December. We added that one into our calendar. Our master food preserver, Catherine, is going to be doing gifts from the kitchen. So will be another live demo, and we'll see you guys in December maybe. But do check out our website on the events page. That's where we're listing any new programs that we have. And also like us on our Facebook page because we do promote them there. So thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you very
Jane.
much. It was
You're
great.
welcome, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Had some waves going on.
good.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jane.
Okay,
Bye now.
bye. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Get out and enjoy some of that beautiful weather.
Yes.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So I'm going to stop the recording.